When the plane carrying SUGA along with Jungkook and Jimin landed at Los Angeles International Airport that afternoon, the sky was clear and the warm summer air of California welcomed their first steps out of the arrival gate. And from behind his sunglasses, SUGA saw a small crowd standing neatly behind the barricades, some holding posters, cameras, and phones pointed at them without much noise, only eyes filled with curiosity and admiration following their every move as they walked flanked by several staff members and personal security toward the vehicle that had been prepared. And although the cheers weren't as loud as during a concert, the atmosphere still felt warm, not excessive but clearly showing that their presence was genuinely anticipated. And in the middle of that crowd, SUGA continued walking calmly, dressed in loose black clothes with a small bag slung over his shoulder, not saying much, not turning too often, yet still conveying his gratitude with a slight nod and a subtle wave of his hand, something he often did when he didn't want to attract too much attention but still wanted to appreciate those who welcomed him. And when they finally got into the car, the windows weren't rolled up immediately, allowing them to sit for a moment and enjoy the outside air carrying the scent of a big city mixed with the fragrance of a luxury vehicle, before the car slowly started moving away from the airport area toward the hotel that had been booked in West Hollywood, a hotel that was relatively quiet yet still strategic, surrounded by tall trees and buildings with contemporary architecture that wasn't flashy but very comfortable. And during the ride, SUGA was seen just staring out the window, watching rows of cars, huge billboards, and busy but orderly traffic, letting his thoughts drift along with the rhythm of a city that may not have been unfamiliar but still different from his usual days. And when they arrived at the hotel, the staff greeted them politely, carrying suitcases and opening the way into a cool lobby with the hum of air conditioning and the sound of footsteps echoing softly. No commotion. Only the kind of calm that suited someone like SUGA who was used to peace. And after checking in, they headed straight to their rooms, and SUGA's room was on one of the upper floors with a large window facing the main road and part of the city skyline. Sunlight slowly entering through the curtains, casting a warm glow on the wooden floor and the clean white sofa, and SUGA didn't do much other than sit at the edge of the bed while opening his phone and checking a few notifications, mostly from the label and manager, occasionally opening a music app and jotting something down in his digital notes, not for anything urgent, just a habit of storing small ideas that might be useful someday. And without rushing, he opened his suitcase and began placing some clothes into the small closet beside the bathroom, then grabbed a gray hoodie and some lounge pants, getting ready to spend that afternoon quietly. And even though there were several schedules awaiting in the next 2 days, today wasn't meant to be busy, only for rest and adjusting to the local time, and that afternoon passed in the simplest way. He only left his room once to walk down the hallway to Jungkook's room where food had just been ordered, then returned to his room with a bottle of water and sat again by the window, watching the sun slowly descend, while listening to soft piano instrumentals playing through the small speaker in the room. And without anything that needed commenting on, SUGA allowed that afternoon to fully belong to him, free from interruptions, free from pressure, just a quiet time for himself in a city that was busy yet never forced anyone to always be on display. The next morning, the sunlight filtering through the edges of the curtains brought a gentle warmth into the room, and although the city outside had already begun its usual movement, SUGA remained in his quiet rhythm, slowly getting up and heading to the bathroom to wash his face, then returning to the side of the bed where he scrolled briefly through his phone to check the time and updates from the team, and after changing into a simple outfit, a loose cream shirt and dark pants, he picked up his bag, slid in a small notepad and earphones and left the room quietly, walking through the hallway and into the elevator that took him down to the lobby where the manager was already waiting, and soon after, Jungkook and Jimin joined them, both dressed casually with caps and sneakers, and together, the three of them stepped into the van that would take them to the recording studio arranged for the day, a quiet building in a quieter neighborhood, chosen specifically for its privacy and focus, and the drive there was smooth, the morning traffic still manageable, and during the ride SUGA remained mostly silent, occasionally glancing at the buildings they passed. The people jogging along sidewalks, the cafes already open with small groups seated by the window, and by the time they arrived at the studio, the sun had risen fully but the air inside was cool, and the team who welcomed them at the door seemed familiar with their presence, guiding them to separate workrooms where they could spend their time freely, and SUGA went directly into one of the rooms prepared for him, equipped with a mixing console, instruments, and a chair by the window where natural light spilled across the desk, and without any ceremony, He unpacked his laptop, connected his hard drive, and began working through several drafts of music he had saved, listening closely through his headphones and making small adjustments to the arrangement, occasionally stopping to write a few notes or test a sound on the MIDI keyboard beside him. And this was the kind of setting he was most comfortable in. Structured yet quiet, creative but not chaotic. And in between sessions, someone knocked lightly to let him know lunch was available in the lounge. So he saved his work, stood, stretched his back, and made his way down the hallway to where a few light meals had been laid out. And there, Jungkook was sitting with his drink, scrolling through his phone while Jimin was laughing softly at something on the screen. And SUGA joined them without saying anything, just nodding lightly, then sat and quietly picked his food, choosing something warm and easy, grilled vegetables, rice, and a small piece of fish, and ate slowly while glancing at the conversations happening around him, not needing to contribute much, just content to be there. And after finishing, he returned to his workroom for another hour or so, continuing his mixing, testing new sound textures, rearranging parts of a verse, and even starting something completely new with a simple drum loop and a subtle melody line. And as the sun began to lower outside and the studio's lights replaced the daylight, the manager came by to inform them that the schedule for the day was complete and they could return to the hotel at any time. And SUGA closed his laptop, carefully packed his things again, and stood by the door for a moment before walking out, meeting the others in the hallway, and together they returned to the van, this time moving through heavier traffic, but the ride remained calm, the inside of the vehicle dim and quiet, and SUGA once again gazed out the window as they passed the glowing storefronts, streetlights, and people walking in groups, some holding shopping bags, others just enjoying the evening air. And when they arrived at the hotel, he took a moment in the lobby to grab a bottle of water, nod politely to one of the hotel staff who recognized him, then entered the elevator and returned to his room, stepping into the familiar quiet space that now smelled faintly of fresh linen and citrus from the cleaning staff's earlier visit. And he placed his bag down, changed into more comfortable clothes, and sat again by the window where the city lights twinkled beneath the sky that was slowly turning deep blue. And for the next hour or so he just sat with his notebook, sketching a few thoughts. Not necessarily for music, just pieces of observations, ideas, and feelings that came and went, before eventually putting it down and preparing to rest. And as he lay on the bed in the dim room with only the soft hum of the city outside, he allowed himself to drift into a rest that felt calm, undisturbed, and simple, closing the day in the same quiet rhythm that had carried him through it from morning until night. The room remained dim except for the soft light from a small lamp by the bedside, and outside, the city had settled into its usual nighttime hum, with occasional cars passing by and distant sirens fading quickly into silence. And SUGA, now lying quietly under the sheets, let his thoughts slow down naturally, not trying to review the day nor plan the next, simply allowing his body and mind to exist without demand. And as the air conditioner kept the room comfortably cool, he listened briefly to the subtle whirring above him, feeling the weight of the day not as exhaustion but as a gentle presence reminding him that this kind of slow, intentional rhythm was something he still valued deeply, especially in places far from home. And there, in that quiet hotel room, far from crowds and lights, SUGA closed his eyes and allowed himself to rest, not to escape but to be still, knowing that even in silence and simplicity, he continued moving forward, fully himself, fully present.